Hi, I'm Myra, and this is Trope Trilogy. Today, I'll be talking about supporting characters. This video was requested a month ago, and I'm now just getting to it. Sorry, Fancy Long. It's nothing personal. I was also tagged a month ago, and I still haven't done that tag, so I'm very behind schedule. But back to supporting characters. Just looking at the name, you can actually infer quite a bit. First, they are supporting. Now, I don't mean they're supportive to the protagonist. I mean that they actually support the plot of the story. This means that this character should affect the plot of the story by either helping the protagonist, hindering the protagonist, or both, which in fact I feel like doing both makes them even more interesting. But then the second part of supporting character is character. And like all good characters, they should feel like a real human being. They should have their own hopes and fears, strengths and weaknesses, and they should have their own goal that is not necessarily the same as the protagonist. And even if it is the same, they should interpret this goal in their own way. Personally, I have a notebook for every single one of my characters. Each character, from the protagonist to a character that only gets several scenes, gets one page. This is my protagonist page. This is her brother's page. And then to go to the back, here's some character who barely gets any scenes page. I haven't gotten a picture for him too, though that's not actually that important. I just like getting pictures. On each page, I list out their gender, age and height, appearance, goal and motivation, life experience, 3 strengths, 3 weaknesses, their defining trait, idiosyncrasies they have such as nail biting, and then their 3 biggest values. That is what I do for every single character. I try to make each character distinct from each other, and I also try to match their values to their backstories. Even though side characters don't get a point of view and their thoughts aren't revealed to the reader, you as the author should know why they do things and what they're generally thinking. And in knowing why they do the things they do, you should never make them act in a way against who they are for the sake of plot convenience. It's more effort, but usually more effort makes a better story. There are generally 4 main supporting characters that I see: the love interest, the sidekick, the bully, and the villain. Now, I've done videos on both the bully and the villain, which I will link to here, and I may make videos for the other 2, but for now, I'm just going to give a general of the main flaw for each and how to combat that. Now, my main advice for this is pretty simple. Give them flaws and acknowledge that they are flawed. Also, don't romanticize the flaws, because that's just weird. And also, that goes against the purpose of giving them a flaw. If it's supposed to be attractive, that kind of makes it not a flaw within the story. Also, don't just make romance fix all their flaws. And one of the main reasons I feel like authors have problems fleshing out the love interest is a lot of the opportunities within the book to develop their personality and relationship is wasted on checking them out, flirting, or making out, which none of those are character development. Now, the second character I see a lot is the sidekick or the protagonist's best friend. The main flaw I tend to see with them is they tend to be inferior to the protagonist in every single way. They're uglier, weaker, dumber, and their only personality traits is that they're quirky and funny. And either all they do is follow the protagonist around like a lost puppy or argue with the protagonist for stupid reasons. And to be honest, the main solution for this is to actively make your sidekick or friend character better than the protagonist at least one thing, preferably more. However, don't go to the other end of the spectrum and make the sidekick so much better than the protagonist that the protagonist is dependent on them, because that just makes your protagonist not very interesting. However, this is more common with making them too dependent on the love interest. My main point is that the protagonist and their sidekick slash best friend should be equals. And also, when the protagonist and sidekick fights, sometimes the sidekick should be right. I don't care how precious your protagonist is to you. They should be wrong sometimes. They should not be perfect. Now, third and fourth, I'm combining the bully and the villain, because the main problem I see when they're written tends to be the same. And that is that they're bad with no cause, has no redeeming qualities, their motivation is either non-existent or makes no sense, or it's cliche. The solution, again, is pretty simple. Just give them at least, preferably more, one positive trait, and to explore how they became who they are. And I don't mean everyone has to have some tragic, sympathetic backstory, but at least understand why they act the way they do, even if most of that exploration doesn't make the page. But on a side note, a bully is not a villain, and if your bully is going around murdering people, I think they're more of a villain, and you should either treat them as a villain or fix your bully, because that's crazy. Also, my advice for the villain goes for the love interest, goes for the sidekick, and vice versa. But the main lesson to take from these points is that you should put as much effort in understanding and developing your side characters as you do your protagonists, and that you should make them well-rounded with both attributes and flaws. You should think of these characters as real humans, and in turn, your book should treat them as real humans. Recently, me and my friend saw a movie where a group of went on a mission and everyone died except the two main protagonists. And after escaping the slaughter, the girl quipped about how her dress got ripped. What the heck? Real people dying is bad. So if your supporting characters are killed, other characters should react. And if they don't, it should either be because you're establishing them as a sociopath, or you're establishing the setting as being apathetic to death. Neither of which this movie was doing, which in turn made me not like the protagonists. The truth is if your protagonist does not either care about a supporting character or on the opposite end see them as a threat, neither will your reader. And that leads to what I think is the most important aspect of a character, which is their relationships. How they interact with others and affect others. And personally, I find relationships in books more important for me getting invested than individual characters. If you have well-developed characters that never interact and are just floating through space, not interacting, I don't care if they can do a triple backflip and they have mommy issues. I really don't. Humans are social creatures, so let your characters be social. And also make sure that every single relationship your character has is different. For an example of a great side character, I'm using An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. The character within this book that I'm referring to as a great side character is Helene. She doesn't have a point of view in this book, but she feels just as real as the two protagonists, Elias and Laya. She has her own hopes, fears, values, and motivations, which cause her to both help and hinder both protagonists. She loves Elias but envies Laya, which causes conflict for both the protagonist and her, and in turn affects how she interacts with them. By giving Helene individual traits such as loyalty to the Empire, a goal such as having Elias survive, backstory, and unique relationships with each character, Tahir creates a supporting character who feels real, is interesting, and affects the plot in unique ways. But the main lesson to take from these points is give them fleshed out and realistic personalities, understand how they think, and make their relationships both varied and important. And that is my main advice for creating supporting characters. Later!